There was a philosopher around the 19th century. His name was Soren Kierkegaard. He was one of the founders, supposedly, of this branch in philosophy called existentialism. There is nothing new really about this particular branch. It's just I think it just became fashionable for Westerners to think a certain way, and then they categorize it as existentialism. But if you look at the core kind of current of what lives inside this particular field in philosophy, you may encounter that someone like Jesus was an existentialist, someone like Muhammad was one, Mahavira was another. In other words, anyone who begins to kind of reflect and feel deeply about their reflection and their place in life becomes, to some extent, an existentialist. Kierkegaard was a very sad man, but he was also very funny. And he had mentioned that the most melancholic of people have the best senses of humor as a coping mechanism. Not because there is anything funny about life, but the way you express the despair that you have in life is through humor. It's, even if you were to read, for example, the four Gospels, not the four, the three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, because John doesn't have any stories, you'll encounter it is such a sad place for someone like Jesus that despite all of his wisdom, that the only way he can respond to any question really is just through stories. Okay. You have if you go to Shakespeare, if you go to the Native American culture, what you realize is that in both the Shakespearean era as well as the Native American era, what you have is a clown, a jester, a humorist, a satirist, kind of like Sophocles. And they happen to be the only people who can go before the most powerful and make fun of him or her. And it was done for the reason for someone like me. I take myself very seriously, and let's say you raise your hand and in a very funny way you say something philosophically. Your reflection, the way you express it, just happens to be funny. And in a very indirect way, what you're saying to me is don't take yourself too seriously. You know, because at the end of the day, philosophy is much too grand, life is far too complicated, human beings are enormously complex, and so don't make life so black and white. There are lots of gray areas around. And so I can take that as an insult or an offense, but because you and I have a relationship and because all the people here, you're the only one who has been assigned to making fun of me, then I cannot take your expression, and that has a very humiliating factor for me, but one that does not make me become offensive towards you, but I cannot go back, I become more internalized, and that gets me closer to this thing called humility, which is to counter what they call pride. You have someone like Dave Chappelle, or you have someone like Jerry Seinfeld, who kind of, not so much Seinfeld, but maybe Cat Williams and Dave Chappelle. And one of the nice things about these two comedians is that first, they're black. Second, you have to understand the history of what it means to be black, especially in America. And third is, well, how do you express some of the tragedies you see on a daily basis around you? Do you become like Franz Fanon, who becomes an existentialist and writes things in a very, very heavy and serious way? Or do you become like a Dave Chappelle or a Cat Williams, where you talk about racism in a funny way, but it's not really supposed to be taken funny. It's supposed to be taken very seriously, but you take a good amount of seriousness with a good amount of laughter, balances out. Your question about how you cultivate, I think your sense of humor, I think it's like any art. You see a lot of things around you, you don't really know what to do with them. Initially, because you don't really have very much power, you kind of sit and maybe you think, maybe you reflect, maybe you take them to church. At a certain point, you realize that there is perhaps another way to express all the stress and all the conflict and all the frustration and anxiety that lives inside you, and that's done through comedy. And as you practice any craft more and more and more, you become better at it. You know, it's like anything else in life. Imagine you and I go out on a date, for example. I am nervous, you are nervous. The second date, you'll be less nervous, I'll be less nervous. By the fourth, fifth, sixth date, we're going to grow very comfortable with one another. So we can, throw lots of jokes around without you becoming offended, me being offended. And that's how basically things work out. I don't know what the how-to is. It also depends on whether you go on the stage to make a buck, or whether you go on the stage to make a buck as well as to tell certain truths. How was Yosemite? To make a few bucks as well as, expressing some of the tragedies around you. I think there's a place and time for all of us. There's a time to be serious. I mean, just, watch Cat Williams and Dave Chappelle. And I say Dave Chappelle because I think he's far more eloquent than Cat is. And he's more of a political activist than Cat Williams is. And what you realize is that he makes you laugh for about 10 minutes, and then he makes you think for about 5 minutes, and then he makes you cry for about 2 minutes. And he does that throughout his show. I mean, I don't know. It's a complicated question. Good luck. Anna? Yeah, Scarlett.
I was just kind of wondering what you had to say about like addiction, but I was also kind of wondering how that fits into like some of the stuff you were talking about before with like desire and it kind of having like a birth and a death.
Do you have a companion? Did you have one?
I guess.
Did you guys hang out often? Was there a time where you said to yourself, I just need to be around this person?
Yeah.
Would you categorize that as a form of addiction?
I guess it,
Just say yes. So if you were to go back in time and ask yourself how this particular addiction came about, the answer would be very difficult. With some reflection, you would say that I went somewhere to a gathering of sorts. I saw someone. Our eyes met. Attraction came about. I don't know how or why or when or who, but it's something instinctual, intuitive, organic. It just came about. At a certain point, I realized that I want to act on this particular feeling. I went towards this person, said hello. Their voice sounded good, they smelled good, they looked good. I realized that they have some interesting thoughts and ideas about this and that. Then I summoned up the courage and I asked for their number. They gave me that number, I texted, we hung out some more, and my focus became a bit more localized laser just into one single human being. And then we started hanging out more and more and more often. And they became the centerpiece of my life. And then when I wasn't with them, I missed them. I longed to be in their presence, And all of a sudden you realize, well, this is a person you want to hang out with all the time. I mean, there's a good amount of fear involved with it, because what you realize is that all of a sudden, most of your identity now revolves around the single human being. And if you happen to have come from like a background where certain parts of you are broken, that could be a very frightening kind of experience, because you've never really allowed anyone to have a good hold of you. And for the first time now, someone does, which means that you lose independence, freedom, autonomy. You've been hurt before, you don't want to be hurt again. You distrust human beings and human nature. You don't really trust yourself. So all those things happen. But regardless of those negative emotions, you kind of wake up at 2 in the morning while you go to the bathroom to pee. You say, I miss this person. Addiction. So when an experience gets repeated over and over and over and over again, you kind of create this bond, this relationship. And the thing about relationships is that they always have history inside them. History are stories. Stories create emotions, negative, positive. Stories also allow you to have access to your future. I am going to be with this person for the next 5, 6, 7, 9, 10 years. We're going to go to some coffee shop and have coffee later on today. So we create all these stories, and that kind of gives rise to a Skylar that lives at 12 o'clock today. And you can replace a companion with drugs, with porn, with video games. It doesn't really matter. All addictions rest on a relationship. In other words, something you did gave you a good amount of pleasure, and you said, and because we are pleasure-seeking animals, and that is what drives us forward, you keep doing it until it becomes part of you and you become part of it. You can grow tired of the relationship in 2 ways. You'll either get dumped, or life kind of just sucks the life out of that relationship, and you stand there and you say, well, this doesn't really mean anything anymore. Or you begin to understand certain things about yourself, how you're changing as you're growing and maturing, and all of a sudden that understanding terminates the pregnancy or the relationship. There was a guy, his name was Krishnamurti. He was an Indian philosopher, sage, kind of raised in a cult. Once he gained his independence, he kind of rebelled against this cult named the Theosophical Society, saying that the truth really has no path. And people just have to kind of sit back, read their own life experiences, be able to observe with a clear mind, put their experiences under a microscope, figure out their beliefs, their biases, their prejudices, and hopefully, they'll understand. He had argued that the addiction that most of us, myself included, suffer from is the addiction of just habits in thinking, habits in doing. That's the authority figure. That's the tyranny that lives inside you. You don't need to look for Donald Trump or George Bush or anyone out there who holds you hostage. The thing that holds you hostage from the moment you wake up to the time to go to bed, it's your own experiences that create a certain belief system. Now, that is another kind of addiction. Overcoming any addiction is going to be difficult, because what you're talking about is destroying a relationship that still gives you meaning, dependence, purpose. It's a coping mechanism of sorts. Imagine you and I are hanging out together. Well, aside from being friends, I also release you from boredom. I also release you from loneliness. I also, lots of frustration, anxiety. I give you meaning. I give you a safe shelter. So just in case you want to break up with me, there are all these other things that you're going to lose as well. And that's why we always go back, retreat to the thing that brings us most comfort, even if it's devastating and toxic. Maybe I didn't understand your question.
I just
Addiction isn't bad. It just depends what you're addicted to. That's all. If you were to hang out with your dad, for example, probably want you to be addicted to going to school, keeping a 4.0 GPA, applying to Berkeley or Stanford or Princeton or Yale. Okay. If you hang out with me, I'll probably take you to the estuary. There we'll sit, we'll smoke, we'll become good friends. So if you hang out with your father, your main focus in life to which you'll be addicted is wanting to go to big schools, you know, getting a PhD or a master's or whatever at the age of like 25, 26. If you hang out with me, you'll kind of probably be left behind. You know, you'll realize certain truths about yourself, about life at the age of like 45. So, you know, even though existentialists have this gung-ho idea about free choice being authentic, the truth is freedom from and freedom to, I mean, that's the main core of what we call existentialism. Can you be free from being addicted to this particular way of thinking? And can you be free enough to kind of entertain a different kind of a belief system, for example? The thing about choices is that you have to know what is good for you. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do. Because most often we don't really know. I mean, if you're like a genius, like a Magnus Carlsen, the choice is easy. You're just born and you want a chessboard. For someone like me, well, it's going to take about 20, 30 years. Right now, you're very young, which means that just in case you suffer from some loneliness, you're a young, attractive person, I'm sure you can go out there and find yourself many companions. As you get a little older, as you become a bit more aware of your age, you know, the sort of poverties that live inside you, as you become more reflective about your past, all the things you have done, and all the ways life has betrayed you, all the ways you have betrayed yourself, you become a bit more cautious. And it happens organically to all of us. You know, you can be a hippie for the first like 30, 40 years of your life, and then life catches up to you. At a certain point, you realize that making certain choices could be very, very dangerous, you know. And you realize that, yes, life does offer you a lot of choices, but sometimes those choices can actually be very, very dangerous should you make them. So you begin to study, you begin to be more reflective, you begin to live an examined life. And when you start doing that, you realize that despite all the choices out there, your options are quite limited. So instead of having 20 friends, now you have 5. And when you get to be my age, you'll have none. Because most of them are dead. Point is, hang out with, you know, older people. 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. رو بگو رستاندنی خاموش نشین آن خاموشان سخنگو را ببین. Once you learn Persian, you can figure it out. Yes, Anna.
I was wondering, where do you think, like, fear of being vulnerable comes from?
You and I are in a relationship, let's just say. And we get into a tiff. And because I like to fight, I keep putting salt on this wound. And this tiny thing grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. What do you think keeps me from apologizing to you? Upon reflection, do you ever regret not listening to your parents? Have you ever gone to them apologizing to them? You have? Like verbally? Like your mom heard it?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I would say I just Like, oh, you told me this thing and I didn't listen. And
How long did it take?
how long did it take?
Yeah.
Probably a little while.
That's how it is. Yeah. I think it just takes a long time for you to realize that you're a piece of shit. For all of us. And that's the best place to be. Because you don't really take yourself that seriously anymore. You don't take, certainly, other people seriously. Uh, it doesn't mean that you don't know the things out there that require seriousness. You do know them. But you also realize that to take certain things seriously requires a great amount of mental energy and physical energy to will them to life. You know, if, for example, you were to come to the office, but you have a certain expression, there's a certain body language that you have, you're kind of sad, you're kind of angry, and I ask, so Anna, what the hell is going on with you? What are you doing in my office, you know, poisoning the environment? You know, depending on what it is, you know, it's always going to be difficult revealing yourself to another who happens to be a stranger. There was a movie with Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Frankie and Johnny. Frankie is Michelle Pfeiffer and Johnny is Al Pacino. Al Pacino is serving time or has served time. He now has a job in this coffee shop. The waitress dies. The following day, he goes to the funeral. Michelle Pfeiffer asks him, "You don't even know her. Why did you come to the funeral service?" And he says, "When human beings go to bed at night, they go to bed with a good amount of regret. They put their hopes and dreams under the pillow. When they wake up, they take them out and they want to kind of live them out while awake, only to realize it's kind of difficult." Long story short, they get into a relationship and she's brushing her teeth, and Al Pacino, while sitting at the counter, looks at Michelle Pfeiffer and says to her, "Can you take off your clothes?" She says, "No." "Take them off, please." Again, she says, "No." "That's a ridiculous request. Why are you asking me? I just want to know that you trust me enough that when I tell you to just take them off, you take them off." And there's a lot of things you have to overcome, because you're talking about another human being judging you. The idea that Jean-Paul Sartre had mentioned many, many years ago, that other people are hell, that maybe you have a question to ask in this class, but because of my attitude, because the fact that sometimes I can be a jerk and an ass, your hand remains down and your question will never come up, because when you do ask a question, I may make fun of you. And you realize that you asked this question to kind of free yourself from some repressed emotions. Maybe you have this deep-seated relationship with this question or a particular event that now you want to express, but I make fun of it. And other people make fun of it. Even if I was not to make fun of your question, but the question happened to reveal something about who you are, what you are, where you've come from, what you've gone through. And you have no idea how these people are going to look at that question, i.e. look at you and judge you. And so in revealing yourself, you have to be okay with another human being judging you. Now, it's very different when you remove your clothes before someone that you know and you trust and you have a history with. Okay? To be asked to remove your outfit, your clothing by someone you just met, that's a very, very difficult thing to do, unless you just happen to be kind of in the prostitution business, and where you just have diarrhea of the mouth, that you really have no self-respect, and you're just looking for some free ears to kind of just ram into those ears with your story. And nobody really cares for your story, but you have found some free ears nevertheless, so you just keep telling them who and what you are and about your past. If, on the other hand, there are some serious things about you, and you hold them very valuable, to some extent maybe even hold them very sacred, you say, very much like your body, I am going to keep my stories very private, as I will keep my body very private, and I will reveal my body only to those, or only to him or her that I trust and I love. And so you become monogamous in that sense. If you don't give a shit as much, then you kind of just reveal who and what you are to anyone who comes by. And you find them worthy of sharing with them a couple of information about you. But for most of us who are not very professional in that regards, it's very, very tough. Very, very tough. It's not difficult to have sex. Take off your clothes, someone goes inside you go inside someone, it's finished. But to open up emotionally, that's tough. Intellectually, it's easy. You read a couple of books, you come to class, you talk about them, and you go home. Nothing, easy, But to open up emotionally, that takes a different kind of training. And I think the task of Stoicism, or maybe philosophy, really, is to reveal to you, as Tolstoy would say, that there is a part of you that's made of the stars. You have a great amount of light inside you, the kingdom of God. But there is also a good part of you that is made of dung. You are just shit, And you also have to understand the nature of society and what it does to you and how it's created. You also have to understand advertisement. You also have to understand that you're nothing really but the experiences given to you by other people. They're not your own. There is nothing about you that belongs to you. The only thing you do once in a while is falsely claim ownership, to them. And Stoicism basically argues the only thing you can do is study your emotions, study why they're there, how they're there, why do they push you around all the time. And once you graduate from that particular study, then you can kind of be free from them. Like Epictetus, you're a slave. And you're able to kind of detach yourself from all the emotions created by the forces outside of you. You take them seriously, at the same time you don't really much care for them. And then you can just open up, make fun of all sorts of things, including yourself. I think if you believe also in biological evolution, there is something about us that recognizes that the world is dangerous, that you can't just open yourself up to anyone out there. They could use that information against you. من از بیگانگان هرگز ننالم که با من هر چه کرد آن آشنا کرد. You've seen the movie K-Pax? K-Pax is with, what's his name? Kevin Spacey. Really good actor. Spacey is supposedly from this planet called K-Pax, and he lands down here to kind of study human beings, human nature, human society. He goes to his therapist's house, and while the therapist is engaged in entertaining his guests, the wife comes in, and she opens up, and she tells him all sorts of private things, and all of a sudden she bursts into tears, saying to him, I'm sorry, I don't know why I just told you all those things that are so private to me and my husband. And Kevin Spacey, i.e. K-Pax, looks at her and says, you told them to me because I can't hurt you. You don't know me. I can't use them against you. The Persian poem is from Hafez, that if you pay close attention to all the hurts and the wounds that live inside you, they are really caused by the people closest to you. You run to your father for a hug, he screams at you. You give all you have to your boyfriend or your girlfriend, they reject you. As Albert Camus would say, you throw all of your dreams and hopes into life, but life demolishes you. And then all of a sudden you realize maybe it's best not to give all of who and what you are to another. Maybe there's certain parts of you should remain to yourself and only be given. And maybe that's the reason why we have religion. If there are things you want to keep hidden from the public, from even people closest to you, because you can't really trust them, go to church, cry them out. Because God can't hurt you. I can. One of the nice things about this particular teacher from Armenia, Gurdjieff, his task was to figure out your stories. Like a good therapist, he would figure out your trigger points, okay? And then from that point on, the only thing he would do was to push them. He would keep pushing them. And you would scream and scream and scream until you realize that your screaming doesn't do anything. In fact, this trigger point doesn't mean anything anymore either. You become indifferent towards it. Now you're free. So it depends, on who you are, who you're working with, what you're ready for. So, good luck. If you read that book, Daughter of Fire, do you know what that book is? Have you ever seen the book, heard of the book? What you have in the book is you have this guy, and he has this woman in his hand. He can toy with her. And his task is to set her free. And so he keeps toying with her for like 600 pages until she submits. And then the only thing that she's bothered by for the next like 7, 8, 9, 10 years is that this man on whom she depended for everything, he's dead. Then she had to overcome that. And then she begins to write and she begins to talk and all those things. It's much better to be broken by someone who knows. I mean, it's much better to give a 2x4 to a seasoned carpenter than to a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old can cut, but the lumber will go to waste. What usually happens to us, we are given to life, and life just toys with us. And you try to kind of figure out what to do with all the brokenness inside you. There's a reason why you go to a therapy session. If you happen to have a very, very good therapist, that person just lasers onto the issues and then slowly helps you look at those issues and then deal with the emotions that are caused by looking at those issues and then trying to give you the proper tools to deal with those issues. Now, these are different stages you have to go through. It takes a long time for someone just to be able to see. It takes a long time for someone just to be able to feel the things that they see, and then overcome those feelings. It takes another few years to kind of figure out what tools they need to overcome. And then it takes another few years to kind of figure out how to best use these tools. And then eventually use the tools. And then because you're new at every stage, you have a mess around you for the first like 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And then at the age of 50 or 60, now you know exactly what lumber you need, if you need pressure treated, if you need cedar, if you need just regular, what is it called? Whatever. What kind of saws you need, all those things. It just takes a long time. What's his name? Was it Diogenes? Yes, Diogenes. Have you heard of him? Diogenes was the founder of the Cynic school. One day, he started masturbating in public. Just close your eyes, visualize that. And he's taken before a judge. And the judge, begins to ask him some questions. Diogenes looks at this guy and says, Your Honor, have you never masturbated? Yes, I have. Do you think it's normal, organic, natural? Yes. Should I be ashamed of something that's so organic? Eventually he's released. But you have to understand a lot of things to kind of come to a place where you can just be open. Sometimes you can be open with people and then you regret being open. It's like having sex, realizing it's just with the wrong person. It's like that. Anyone else? Yeah, of course.
Can you explain what aesthetics and beauty is?
Probably not. Aesthetics? Just beauty. What is beauty? What is beauty?
When they talk about it as a branch of philosophy.
I don't either, even though I used to teach the class. So let me just give you my version. Is that okay? Do you exercise? Do you sweat when you exercise? Does your sweat smell bad? Does it inspire like a beautiful self-image? Do you shower? Aesthetics. If you look at our physical evolution, we used to walk around naked, hunting Godzilla and being hunted by them. We eventually began to understand the seasons, agriculture came about, we invented the wheel, so traveling became easier, domestication of animals. And then now you have permanent settlements. You begin to have a bona fide relationship with the land. But this is the place that you've grown wheat for the past like few thousands of years. The land belongs to you. You have a history with it. You bury people in that land. So you only also have relationships and memories with family members, with friends, with the soldiers who fought on your behalf. And that land has produced lots of rituals, lots of ceremonies. It's kind of like the stuff we talked about with drugs, that you don't look at them as simply plants, but you look at them as plants who can teach you a few things about yourself, about life, about mystery, about God. If you look at, for example, sculpture from the Egyptian time, then the Minoans, then the Greeks, then the Romans, then the Middle Ages, what you realize is that this particular craft has just become better and better and better. And its zenith really happened in the Greek era, the golden age of Greece, which was, for the first time, what you have is these pieces of these statues where the jaw is square and the cheekbones are high and the lips are full. And you look at the body, you know, the stomach is no longer flabby. It's like six-pack, like Cristiano Ronaldo. I mean, everything is so well defined. And then you have Greeks' involvement with math, and math being like these divine numbers, very much like what Pythagoras had argued, that if you really want to understand God, you really need to understand math, and you really need to understand order, because in it there is beauty hidden, but you have to decode all of them. And then all of a sudden the nature of architecture changed. They want to make sure that there is this wonderful story, it's in a book called The Teachers of Gurdjieff. It's about a Westerner who goes to the Middle East to figure out if any of those teachers are still alive. And so he's told to go to the bazaar somewhere and go to this like rug shop or carpet shop and just wait there. And so this guy goes and he sits for an hour, then 2 hours, and 3 hours. Tired, he sits on like a collection of rugs. And all of a sudden this stranger comes forth and says to him, "Do you think I can buy that rug? Do you think it's suitable for me to pray on?" And this Westerner who lacks certain knowledge of the culture looks at the rug and says, "Yeah, I don't see why not. It's a great looking rug." And the stranger just slaps him really hard, saying that pay close attention to the colors and the design and the harmony, and you realize it counters the flow of your psyche. And you only say it's a good drug because you don't understand anything. So if I was to kind of answer your question in a very casual and ridiculous and infantile way, I would say the following. At the age of 18, you become interested in people who are physically attractive. Right? And those who are physically attractive don't require very much work. And they're shallow, which makes the relationship go easy and smooth for a while. Because everything revolves around like pleasure. And those kinds of pleasure are easily obtainable. They don't involve conversations, especially the ones that have some philosophical reflection in them or political reflection in them. You guys can spend like hours in bed having sex, ordering pizza, watching a movie. It's easy enough. There comes a point where, and it happens organically, there comes a point where you say, there is nothing wrong with the sex and there is nothing wrong with ordering pizza from Zachary's or Round Table. But once in a while, I want to look this person in the eye and have a nice conversation, something that's meaningful. Now, what you have done is you have elevated your definition of beauty. Yes, they have a beautiful body, as Socrates would say, he's got a beautiful body, but does he have a beautiful mind as well? And so you realize all of a sudden, without really knowing, that all of a sudden there is another thing upon you, another cross you have to carry, and figure out whether this person can think well. And you realize, yes, he can think well. Then you move to a different stage where you say, he has a great body, he's got, great sort of reflective tools, he's read a lot of books, but I don't feel any passion. And by passion, I don't mean confusion. Because sometimes passion and confusion are when you're confused, you're desperate, you're hungry. And I suppose passion could be the same thing, but it's something you understand. It's like a passion that a father has for a daughter or a son, or parents have for their children, that they worry about them. They want the best for them. It's because they understand the dangerousness of life. Their hopes and dreams for their kids are healthy. Then there comes a point where you say, they feel good, they think good, their body is great. Then you go to them and say, so how about we move in together? And you say, well, are they mature enough to commit? And you're at a place where if they say no, you have no problem walking away because you have been saturated by the physical beauty, by the intellectual beauty, by the emotional beauty. And as you grow, as you mature, your definition of aesthetics or beauty become much more complete, much fuller, much richer. You expect more, you demand more. Someone with just good looks no longer please you. Someone with just being able to think no longer please you. Someone who can feel and think at the same time no longer pleases you. Okay. Then, let's say he says yes or she says yes to the commitment. Then you go to the next step. Do you want to get married? That's another aspect of beauty in the relationship that you want to get to. Do you want to have a family? And all those things mean, does the person have the ability to keep a job, to make money, to save money, to spend that money on the right things, to have the right sort of friends so they don't contaminate the relationship? Once you have children, then your definition of beauty changes all the time. When I was single, I didn't mind having people around who used to smoke or drink once in a while. But when I got a bit more serious in my life, I refrained having those people in my life, period. So the point I suppose I'm trying to make is, imagine everyone to be a piece of art. That's what people are, a piece of art in progress. The question is, at what stage are you? What sort of an artwork do you want to have? And it's a story I've shared in the class. I remember calling this Persian woman, she's a pianist. I knew her from a long time ago. She used to play in gatherings for us once in a while. And I said, listen, would you mind teaching my daughter some piano? And the first thing she asked is, how old is she? She's like 5. No. What do you mean no? Just come to the house, teach her some piano. No. Why? I don't have the patience for 5-year-olds anymore. I mean, it's wonderful to kind of see a 5-year-old and laugh at them and hopes and dreams about them. It's great. But I'm no longer seeking money. I no longer see myself working with 5-year-olds. I want advanced students. Curiosity is no longer as interesting. That's the way I would. But different people define it differently. So, but ترسم که اشک در غم ما پرده در شود و این راز سر به مهر به عالم سمر شود. گویند سنگ لعل شود در مقام صبر آری شود ولیک به خون جگر شود. It's a poem by Sa'di. ترسم که اشک در غم ما پرده در شود. So let me just give you a decent translation and commentary. Parde, it means curtains or veil. But since Persian poetry is just filled with symbolism, parde is your eyelid. Ashk are tears. Gham is sorrow. Imagine you're walking on College Avenue and it's like 7:30, the sun is beginning to set, and you happen to be in a certain mood and you're minding your own business, and all of a sudden you run into a friend, acquaintance of sorts, and they say, so Lilac, how are you doing? Now they ask the question very casually, but what they don't really know is that you left your house aimlessly, you felt a bit homeless, you find yourself on college because you're restless and there's a good amount of sorrow inside you. And the only thing that keeps you from crying are your eyelids. And then the moment someone asks very casually, how are you? Your eyelids open and the tears flow down. That sometimes you're afraid to, it's kind of going back to Anna's question, you're afraid to speak because you don't know if words are going to come out or tears. Vin raz sar be mohr be alam samar shavad. That this secret I've held within all of a sudden is going to be revealed before all these strangers. Sa'di, you can get more of him once you learn Persian. Please, sorry, go ahead.
when someone hurts you, do you think there's some responsibility to tell them and like talk to them about it, or
Imagine you and I are in a relationship. And I am the instigator. Something that was to be so casual, like a conversation, turns into this intense disagreement and concludes as a fight where you slam the door shut or I slam the door shut, I walk out. Also, since relationships involve two people with unequal power, either I have more power in this relationship or you have more power in this relationship. The ultimate shade of power is maybe you just don't have a problem leaving the relationship. Maybe that's just the way you are, for whatever the reasons are. Maybe your life is unfinished. Maybe you're conflicted about the relationship, whatever the case may be. Since you desire to walk out and I desire to be in the relationship, and I know that you wronged me and you owe me an apology, but because you have the power in the relationship and you also have the power to leave, you're not going to apologize unless you just happen to be profoundly mature and decent. And since I'm cornered, I will walk to you or get some flowers from some cemetery out there and I'll say, I am sorry. It was my fault, when in fact, it was all yours. It takes men a long time to realize they're pieces of shit. That's the number one thing you need to understand. It takes a long time for men to overcome their pathetic pride. Women, for the most part, are in relationships, get damaged more often than men do. Fourth, women have an expiration date in a way that men don't. Women, for the most part, are feelers, whereas men are not there quite yet. Women, in many ways, are much more perfect than men are. It's always best to be in relationships with a good amount of power, individual power. You know, when you and I get into a relationship, you should have a savings account. Or if I refuse to give you one, let's have a shared savings account where your name is on the account as well. And just in case I decide to walk out or you decide to walk out, you will take half of that with you. If you want to be in a relationship with me, make sure that there is a future for you in this sense. Don't commit to me being poor. Commit to me when you're rich. Be done with school, not just a bachelor's, with a master's. Have power. When you have power, you can rebel. You can be independent. You know what your rights are. You know what your truths are. And you're not going to allow anyone to offend you. I know the New Testament inside and out. I'm not going to let anyone bully me. I know the Quran inside and out. I know what it means to be young because I've been there. I'm not going to have you tell me about love. I don't care about your ideas. When you walk into any relationship, not having power, you enter with poverty. Poverty creates the wrong codependency. And when you become codependent to someone who's not ripe, who's not mature, they will toy with you without perhaps knowing. And even if someone was to come to apologize to you, it doesn't change your position in life, which is one of poverty. And I think that's especially important these days because everything is a mess around us, I may be a lover of Søren Kierkegaard, and I may be a lover of his ethical stage of life, where I can go to class and talk about the 3 stages of life in a very profound way for 5 hours. But the truth is, I'm not going to live the ethical life. That's too much to make a promise and to keep that promise regardless of what that promise creates, the emotions that it causes. One of the nice things about kids, I have a few kids, I may desire to leave my life, but the kids force me to stay in the relationship. And it's not even because I love my kids. I just don't want them to be damaged because they have like another 50, 60 years to go. I want them to be around to see where they'll end up. But I know what damage looks like because I've been teaching for 30 years. So, for those of you in this class who want to be in relationships, make sure your companion is about maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years older than you are. That they have some like real life experiences, that their life does not just revolve around books. Anyone else? Maybe yes.
Can you tell us about emotional power?
I was going to do something very nasty. Like, you can't just study the emotions, because you have a set of emotions that come from your body. You know, hunger creates emotions. Being uncertain whether you can pay the rent creates emotions. That's an emotion that's directly connected to your physical body. Your physical body, unfortunately, is situated in a very harsh and cruel physical space called the social world. The social world has your parents in it, your siblings in it, your friends in it. These are the intimate relationships you have. Then you have your neighbors, then you have society at large, then you have your job, then you have the teachers you need to please. There are all sorts of forces, seen and unseen, coming at you full force. Okay. Now, it's much easier to forgive your parents for having caused you negative emotions, because they are your parents, they are your relatives, they are your siblings. These are easily forgivable. But when it comes to your boss, that's a very, very different situation, which means that those emotions are also going to come with a good amount of revenge, rebelliousness. Okay. Then your system could be religious, your social system, your political system could be, your system could be capitalism, it could be communism. So there are all these different forces at play in your life. So, and you have different kinds of emotions at different levels of who and what you are. Now, emotions create relationships. Relationships create identity, meaning, purpose. If I make you feel bad, it is because I need you to get your master's degree. That's my only reason for make you feel like shit. If I look at you and say, fuck you, I want to know if you will come back again to class next week, Tuesday. If there is enough trust between you and I, where you're simply able to brush off my statement or my comment, harsh, but you're willing to come back, because there is something about you that sees something much more valuable than simply the two words F you. Okay. Now, one of the things about these forces is that they're kind of like AT&T. Every 6 months, they're going to come up with a brand new cell phone. There is nothing stable about emotions. Emotions are these products that have a tendency of toying with us from the moment you wake up to the time you go to bed. Okay. Now, something about you needs to be developed. And for that to happen, someone needs to inject an image inside you. You have all these fields at Laney College, all these classes you can take. If I am able to interest you solely in philosophy, no other force out there, no other teacher out there, no other class out there is able to sway you. Okay? That means that there is a part of Abi that has become so strong, so focused, so passionate, that everything she sees about herself and her future revolves around philosophy. That's it. Now, if someone can walk into your life, whether it's a book, whether it's an idea or a human being, it doesn't really matter. If something is able to walk into your life and create inside you a different kind of Abi, does it have feelings? Yes. Does it have emotions? Yes. Is there a demand that those feelings and emotions go through this intellectual and reflective filters? Yes. If that can be cultivated and blossom to maturity for about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, then all the forces out there that are powerful enough to generate feelings and emotions about you, you will feel them and you will have the emotions. They just won't matter to you as much. Do I like my family members to die? No. I love my father. I've been around him for the past 62 years. Okay. Am I aware of the fact that he is 92, close to 93? Yes. Is he slowly beginning to forget things? Yes. Is it going to take place that one day I'm going to hear a message on my phone, Dad is dead, come to Roseville ASAP? Yes. Am I going to break down? Yes. Do I know that this is a natural thing? Yes. Now my mom is going to suffer for the rest of her life. I won't suffer as much. I will feel and will have beautiful, sometimes maybe tragic memories of my relationship with my father. Okay. But those emotions and relationships are not going to impact me as much. Maybe I'll use them as a creative source. I'll sit and write a poem. Maybe I'll sit behind the piano and sing a song. It's not that you don't want emotions. You want the right kind of emotions created by the right kind of environments. But the only way you can do that is by, again, like anything else in life, you need some training. All of us do. You know, my mom called me yesterday saying that one of our best friends, he is about 80, he has prostate cancer, stage 3. Last week, his son, who is 40, a tumor was found in his brain, cancer, stage 2, had an operation a couple of days ago. Now, you would think that being around these people for the past 40 years, I would sit down and be sad. I was a little sad, but not too much. It didn't impact me as much. You know, first because I no longer value the relationship. Second, because I think about this stuff all the time, and the more you think, the more detached you become with emotions. You begin to study them. I mean, there has to come a point to you where you just refuse to be an emotional junkie. And if you want to be emotional, you want to be emotional for the right things. I don't want you to come to my office, tell me your sad story so I can cry. That doesn't, I mean, it probably excite me, but I won't cry. If on the other hand, my father was to tell me a sad story, I will cry because he is my father. That's a relationship worth a few tears, not you. What is that poem from Khayyam? For those of you who don't know this Persian poet, Khayyam is an interesting man. He's like a closet everything. گردون کمری ز عمر فرسوده ماست، دریا اثری ز اشک آلوده ماست. فردوس دمی ز بخت آسوده ماست. رنج بسی از, I don't know, something that the function of the world is to just go around and around and around and around. And every time it goes around, every movement creates a different emotion inside you. What you need to find inside yourself is an axis, the pole. You know, it's like this finger that carries the basketball, but that finger remains stable. That's the thing you need to find in yourself. And the best person for that is Gurdjieff or Krishnamurti. Or if you're able to read the four Gospels the right way, that even life at the end becomes irrelevant. It's not worth living. I mean, these are like highly trained people and people who have studied life very, very closely to come to realize that sometimes, you know, death is much better than life. But you have to be at the very top of the food chain to get to that particular conclusion. Just know that emotions are like wind. They come and they go. Don't give yourself to them. Yeah, yeah.
What would you say is the most valuable thing about you?
Me? Probably nothing.
I don't think that.
Number one, all of us are forgettable. There was a time where I worshiped my teacher. I mean, literally just worshiped him. His house was the only place worth going to. Conversations with him, only worth having, no one else. Time passed. He's dead. What was once valuable no longer is. Was there a time I held myself at a very high esteem? Yeah. I mean, all of us do that when you're young. And you assume that you have enough knowledge about this and that. You have a good amount of self-knowledge. And like you can help people, all those things. Time passes. And you realize the complexities and the multifaceted nature of things. You begin to study death. You begin to study the death of my grandparents, the death of my friends, how often I remember them. And once you realize that, no, you speak of them once in a while, but just only in passing, and that's all. I mean, look, you may think about the class, over the weekend, maybe a minute here, a minute there, but eventually you will forget. And the idea of me, during the weekend, asking myself, is Marco thinking about me? That'd be foolish. Even if you were to think about me, you wouldn't understand me. And, it's like a bubble. You think about me or I think about you for a few minutes and then I go back to life. That's how it works. Maybe the only value that I could have in this class is to give you, maybe, and this is like far in between, few moments of inspiration. That maybe I say something about the 4 Gospels that makes you curious, you're inspired to go and look closely for yourself. Right? Or maybe you just kind of go into this earnest and honest sense of reflection for a few minutes. But that doesn't really mean anything. You need to understand the difference between something that comes and goes and a commitment. These are 2 very, very different things. A commitment has a longer shelf life. That has value. I'm sure you've gone to Safeway and sometimes you want to get milk. And sometimes you do realize that the milks that are about to expire are up front. And the milks that have a longer shelf life are way in the back. So what do? You put 20 of them out and you go and pick the last one because it's going to expire 5 years from now. Now that is valuable. And human beings are very much like that. Eventually, all of us are forgettable. All of us are. Even when I come to class and talk about Gilgamesh, I am only projecting. I am only hoping, fantasizing that perhaps this is what Gilgamesh meant. Do I know what lived inside Gilgamesh? No. Did I have a friend who passed and I said, you know what, I'm going to grow my hair long and walk into the desert and figure out the meaning of life? No. Did I ever run into an Utanapishtim, once again being humiliated by a man who has more wisdom than I? No. I talk about them once in a while. And that's how I bring value to Gilgamesh. But that's like once in a while. All of us are forgettable. And if you're forgettable, you don't have as much value. Anyone else? Is it time, Carmen? You sure? What time is it? 10:18. Oh, man. Well, have a nice weekend. See you next week. I think we only have like 2 more weeks left to... yeah. We don't meet finals week. But thank you for the question.